Hello, welcome to Introspection with Jeff. Today we're going to talk about a few things on my mind. Excuse me, just some casual things. I didn't plan on making a video, so I thought this would be kind of free form and probably short. Earlier today, I got to my first intake appointment with a new therapist in person. Um, I've gone through quite a few therapists in the last couple of years, something like that. Um, and it was a long drive downtown. It was unusual to drive all the way downtown to be able to make an in-person appointment. But I wanted to give some comments. The reason, one reason why I'm doing these videos is for therapeutic purposes. I thought, in the past, I've tried to talk with friends about important issues and thoughts, stuff that I might be able to talk to a close friend about. That I would also talk with a therapist. I hadn't gone to a therapist until recently. Um, I figured, well, all right. Um, I didn't know whether necessarily going to a therapist would help. Perhaps I had the wrong impression of a therapist. I didn't necessarily have a wrong or negative impression of therapy in general, but I figured that I'd rather talk with a close friend who knew me very well and could help me through and give good advice and good feedback. Um, but I just wasn't finding that. So I figured, okay, um, things had settled down. This had been after my mom died. My mom died. I had to move out. I was grieving over the loss of a lot of objects, things left behind. My whole life had just been torn asunder. It certainly felt like it, and realistically, it kind of was. A whole bunch of things. Um, I figured it was time, and I had settled into my apartment. It was time to perhaps talk with somebody, talk with a professional, and at least pay the person for their time. Because there's a close friend I had mentioned before. I'd helped him with his house, and I would talk with him, and he's a good friend, and he tries to help. He to his benefit, I mean, to his credit, when I would call him, he would say, "Well, we can talk for a few minutes, or we can talk for a little while." And he was in the middle of something, um, but it was annoying and almost painful because I would it was restrictive. That's the best word for it. I would begin talking about personal things and opening myself up, and he would say something distracting, like about his cat or about something on TV or washing the dishes or something, and it was almost painful to do that. Um, so that's when I started looking into therapy and blah blah blah. I don't need to go into my history of going to therapy, but I've gone through like seven or eight. This might be something like my eighth therapist because they keep getting either promoted or have get jobs elsewhere or what. Um, in a very short time. This is a short time. This is I began like 2020. Um, anyway, so this too is a form of therapy. I hope it's been helpful for you. Understanding and following my journey and um, following, well, I don't want to say following my advice, but listening to my comments on things, life issues and predicaments and difficulties, and working through them, and the need to keep pushing through and pushing through. um, okay. What actually inspired this video was I was watching a reaction video to Star Wars: A New Hope by somebody, a new channel to me anyway, um, and I hope they continue with it. It reminded me of the movie project I had talked about in a previous few videos about my Madonna project and wanting to impress her, and now I'm basically thinking about um, just finishing the project. Um, I believe it was the prior video to this one, where I talked more. I gave part two of my storytelling, story writing experience. I left it off at a cliffhanger at the end of part one when I'd gotten a letter back from a huge talent agency saying they weren't interested at this time, something like that. Um, so I talked about working on a revision or revisions of the Madonna project, um, and I watched that. I watched this video on YouTube of them commenting on a movie that had been finished, and how remarkable the movie is, and wonderful the trilogy is. And it made me sad that I'd like to be able to create something that wonderful and holds up that well, and I think I can. I wanted to think deeply during this video about why I haven't been able to finish it. Um, I talked quite a bit last time in that part two video about some reasons why. Um, for one thing, my life has just been changed hither and yon, and I'm just trying to keep up. It's like running just to keep in place. It's felt that I've been running just to keep in place. My schedule right now shifts in terms of when I work my second job. Um, I talked last night with somebody I had known. Actually, we were matched on some dating website, some dating website, and she had continued to follow my Facebook posts apparently, and so we talked for a good while. And of course, it was getting into the night, and I just wanted to talk a little bit because I was, frankly, that morning or that afternoon when I was at my second job, just waiting to clock in. I arrived early and I was waiting around. Um, I was scrolling through Facebook and I came across a picture of something. I was scrolling through and it was just a picture of her as my friend, and I remembered that, and I thought, I'm not going to meet anybody. I mean, I when I was younger, I expected being able to find somebody special to date, and then go on more dates and become engaged, fiancés, and get married and have children or have a child. Um, I'd like to have just one child. I was an only child, um, and I don't know if that's ever going to happen at this point. I turned 47 last month, mid-November. I don't know if I'll ever find anybody. I was talking with my therapist earlier today and brought that up, and he said, I had said that I'm looking for someone Jewish, and he said, "Oh, something to the effect that, oh, there are quite a few out there, or there are quite a few out there." And I made some remark back like, "Well, I haven't found them." Um, it's really it feels like my life is stuck. Um, to be frank and honest, it's felt like that way for a number of years, and I've explained before how that feeling of being stuck makes me annoyed and humiliated. Makes me feel embarrassed and humiliated, um, that people may see me not for my true talents, but where I am in life. um, and as a matter of fact, I was remarking earlier today at my first job, my morning job, that I'm making close to minimum wage. I've been doing that just about all my life, except for one job earlier at CNN in Atlanta, and even then that was inexpensive. I mean, that was, I guess, close to what I'd been making shortly afterwards. But I haven't. It's like a glass ceiling. I just haven't been able to break through. Um, but that was I think so far the last job that seemed normal. That it was a full-time job. I was living away from home, um, in an apartment, and I was demonstrating I was capable of it. And I might as well get into it now. I didn't expect it. As I said at the beginning of this video, this will be free form or free flow. Um, I was working nights and I didn't have a lot of money. I worked for a local political activist. I was doing, I think, database work to help her out. And so she gave me some money when she learned that I had gotten this job at CNN. I had to move away, and without anybody else's help, I was able to find some place to live, nice, friendly landlord, um, a decent area. I got a job, of course, CNN. But I packed up everything and just left and told my mom shortly before I was leaving. I was that eager. And I've thought about it as being something like Madonna moving off. Now it's questionable. I've heard some things like that myth about her having $35 in her pocket or something and moving off to New York City. Is exaggerated to be friendly about it. Um, I've heard that in a video that um, from I mean, in the video they mention that there are people close to her who say otherwise. That she had contacts there already, and she had some sort of job ready for when she got there, which is more sensible. But under the impression of what she presumably had done, I thought of that, and I thought if she's brave enough, I could be brave enough to do this too. And that wasn't my exclusive reason for doing it, but I mean, as I moved to Atlanta and began and stayed there, I had that in my mind, and so I had a trainer at the beginning. I was what they called a video journalist trainee, but actually what I was doing was operating the teleprompter. And I had a trainee for the first week or so, and then she was headed off to a different position, and then I got a different trainer. She was blonde, beautiful, and I mean not stunningly gorgeous, but I mean I remember her as looking something like Kelly Bundy in Married with Children. Um, and she had a friend who facially kind of reminded me um, of Chrissy Snow from, although she had orangish hair, as I remember. Um, and at the time, I was working nights. I only had enough money to eat every other day, so maybe a cupcake was the only thing I had to eat. And during that, I remembered Madonna saying that she had, or it being said about her that um, she got by on just snack food, and it helped her keep her trim figure for when she was doing modeling to earn money. Um, I don't know how much of that is true, but at the time I believed it was true. Um, so she was she was short with me. The trainer was short with me, and just I just didn't feel comfortable around her. I've wondered if maybe that also had something to do with Punky Brewster, this person that I had known since elementary school, going all the way up to high school, and that's not a real name. Again, I should mention that's not a real name. I picked that name because she kind of reminds me of Punky Brewster, and I want to protect this person's anonymity. So I had just been still reeling, even though I'd gone through college. I had still had the thought and the desire, the fantasy about talking with her again and having things explained to me about what happened. I'm talking about Punky Brewster. Um, and I didn't get that. And I've thought speculated perhaps that had something to do with my reaction to the trainer, my attitude towards the trainer. I was um, I was it's not like I rebelled. I tried to do the best I could. I felt that I didn't have much training in what I was doing, and I could get into the details, but I felt that I was kind of ill prepared. It was also what the trainer, she was about my age, I'm guessing. Um, how the trainer reacted to me and would react to me, how she trained me, I never felt comfortable. So since then, I tried to look her up on Facebook just to say hi and see how you're doing, and say, gee, I've grown since then, and so forth. And it's funny that towards the all right, so I was there for almost a month. They kept me on 2 more weeks. They were originally going to have me there for 2 weeks, and then that's it. But they kept me on another 2 weeks, and I wasn't even getting a paycheck yet. I didn't get my first paycheck until I'd already been dismissed and I was headed home. That's when I got the first paycheck in the mailbox. And towards the end of that month, I put more time in, like after hours, to learn more and to like sit in or do whatever I could to practice somehow. I don't remember how I practiced, but I remember staying more often. And it seems like the last time that, all right, in context, I guess, like elementary school through high school, it was the same familiar friends, and you were kind of on an even level playing field. Even though I personally, maybe you do too, I personally felt that I had certain talents that made me rise above, secretly be better and more talented than the ones I was going to school with. Um, but more or less, we were on an even playing field in terms of life, like our stage, stages of life. We were at that same level. And then during college, it seemed like everybody moved away, and I was stuck at home with my mom. I mean, it was nice being with my mom, and I'm glad I was able to keep her secure, and she was able to keep me secure. And I couldn't afford to live um, away from home. I didn't have a car, neither did my mom. Blah 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 blah. You may have gotten that impression from my videos in the past. Um, it was during college when I felt like I was stuck. That's when I began feeling stuck, and everybody else moved away. And then they Facebook wasn't around then, but MySpace or whatever was. Maybe MySpace wasn't around at that point. Through my limited knowledge, there was some sense of the internet. I was using the internet. I was on the internet, and I would hear things. So and so has gotten engaged, and so moved away, and is through emails and so forth. I got the sense that they were moving on with their lives, and it seemed that um, they were dating seriously, and then they began being engaged, and then they got married, and then later on, and Facebook comes in, and now they're showing pictures of their children and so forth. I guess it's a common experience people have, that people they had known seem to move on further in their lives, whereas person seeing them thinks that he or she is still stuck. Comment below if you felt that yourself. Um, so um, so yeah, during college, and then right after college, I graduated in August '99, and then I worked at a bagel shop for a few days, and then like a local hot dog place that's been around a long time, for about 2 weeks, something like that. And then I worked for this political activist, um, and she gave me some money I when she found out that I'd gotten this job at CNN, and that that the job would have begun in January 2000. Um, So about that time, that was that was my first job. Um, so good. I hope it's still recording. Momentarily, it flashed on the screen. The iMac thing flashed on the screen went blank, and it said iMac. I hope it's still recording. Anyway, okay, the light is still on. All right. So so towards the end of that month at CNN, I put in more effort, and I began crying like away from the set itself. I would go into a private area. We didn't have individual desks, or at least people in the crew I was in didn't have any desks. There was just like an open arrangement of desks, just like cubicles, basically. Not cubicle, like just it was like a floor of chairs and so forth. Maybe you get the idea. And there were private areas, and I just went into. I remember going crying sometimes in a private area. Um, I remember one time I during the operation of the teleprompter, and the the trainer was there. The blonde trainer was there. And I held it in. I held my frustration in when she was telling me, no, 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 you're making this mistake and that mistake or whatever. And she was showing like frustration towards me, and I just held it in and held it in. And then as soon as um, the segment was over and I was able to leave, I I I just quickly left and then began crying and crying, and I wanted somebody to notice. I wanted somebody to notice how much pain I had been in. I remember towards the end of that month, she was friendlier towards me, and I was expressing that I don't know if this is really a good job for me. I wanted to go into entertainment, and then she asked, or her friend asked, well, why did you pick this? And I said, well, I wanted to get into media, the larger media industry somehow, and this is better than the local jobs that were there for me. Not necessarily there for me, but I mean the local jobs that existed um, where I was in Syracuse. And then I think it was her friend, either one, but I think it was her friend that said, this is a large, I'm pretty sure, yeah, this is her friend that said, the one that looked like Chrissy Snow with orange hair, that said, uh, oh, this is a large company, you could transfer somewhere else. And that was kind of comforting. And then I was just dismissed shortly afterward. That's pretty sad. And I felt humiliated. I felt like a failure. I had to use some of the money to get back to Syracuse. The money from that first paycheck I just got to go back to Syracuse um, and try and get something local. So that sort of fits in with the Madonna movie project. At that point, I already had this project in mind. I had already written a screenplay um, and submitted it to CAA. And right about the time when I was coming home, I learned that there was a letter waiting for me from CAA. And then I arrived home and I opened it, and it was the what I call rejection letter. So there were several down moments when I came back. Around that time, those were several down moments right there. And I struggled to find work. Um, and again, to make an analogy to Madonna, it seems like she would keep trying. She kept trying for work. She like that fighter instinct, and I wanted to believe that I had that same fighter instinct to keep going and try to find something and work. I didn't want to be known as somebody out of work, and it's more than that. I knew that I had this potential and this talent, this wonderful talent, um, and I wanted to find a job, a career, develop a career. It seemed like the people that I looked up to, like George Lucas, even though at the time I didn't know that much about George Lucas's past at that early point in his career. Um, I I I I wanted to start my career, partly because I remember all those years from elementary school all the way through high school. I I had thought, well, I'm being bullied, I'm being picked on. They don't know what I'm really like. I mean, I didn't socialize that much, not because I was especially shy. It's because I didn't see any common ground with them, and they were picking on me and mocking me. I'm not going to open myself up. So, so that's why I wanted very much, um, I anticipated beginning a wonderful, bright career during college and then really after college. Um, I really mean primarily after high school, and I didn't get that. And I've thought about them looking down on me, for what I haven't accomplished. Um, so anyway, so that was a long introduction. What inspired this video, as I said before, was watching a reaction video, to Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, 1977, by George Lucas. And it's a wonderful movie, and launched a wonderful trilogy and set of trilogies. And this Madonna movie project, I want to narrow down why I haven't been able to finish it. I mean, I had notes on, Kabbalistic themes in it, and if you've seen my prior video, part two of my storytelling, craft, the evolution of my storytelling, you know that I discovered Dramatica about 12 or so years after that first screenplay, um, and that took a lot of effort, a number of years to learn how to master it. And then there's, subtext, which came out more recently, that actually showed, um, more of it. Let me explain. I told you before in that prior video, part two, that, Dramatica presents you with a report based on the binary choices you've made and the selections. It starts predicting what your argument is, how it would be reflected in this movie. In other words, I guess what Dramatica is saying, what it's based on, is the notion that you are thinking of this movie in terms of genre, theme, characters, and so forth. All four of those elements are expressions of one central core argument or theme. It's all thematic in some sense. One central theme or statement that you want to express. Um, and Dramatica takes that, and in the report it presents that theme in all sorts of different in terms of all sorts of different factors. It's like looking at a rainbow. It's one bit of light, but it's split up into different colors. And so this is, in some sense, if you take the analogy, um, it's like if you're taking that argument or that theme that you have that you want to express as a writer, and it's splitting it up. The report shows all those different colors. They're all components of this theme or argument. And part of it had a part of the report predicts for each of the four through lines, the I perspective, which would be the main character, and the impact character perspective, which would be this other person that presents an alternative attitude to or philosophy about dealing with your personal problems as the main, looking through the eyes of the main character. This is the alternative way of handling things. And then there's a heart perspective, which would be the emotional, tends to be what people, I guess, would call the more thematic side. It tends to be where the romantic, like, subplots are. That's the relationship or subjective through line, and then there's the head, which would be the intellectual aspect or perspective of what's going on. It's typically what people think of as the overall plot. It's like the Russians are trying to invade the United States, or we're trying to get to the moon. It's the totally objective scenario, and then the heart or the subjective story, relationship story perspective is more like um, these characters, and then it doesn't have to be just the main character and impact character. It would also be other characters um, form relationships between each other, and they're expressing what it means to them and how it feels, and the emotional journey. I had that. I picked that up right away. Well, it says that there, if you may have understood that that periodic table I explained in the previous video, that part two, again, that Dramatica has each of the four types of conflict: physics, universe, psychology, and mind. Below that, below each one of those, there are four, and the reason why a movie has four acts, well, it said a beginning, middle, and end. What they really mean is four acts, four segments. What the mind is doing is just going through each one of those four underneath the physics or psychology or mind or universe. It's just trying to work its the conflict, the central conflict. It's trying to resolve that central conflict by exploring each one of those. So it predicts which of those. It's predicting the order or the sequence of them. So during a movie, you'd have the main character through line, the impact character through line, the objective story through line, and the subjective story through line running parallel. And if you imagine this line right here, this would be the journey that each one of them takes simultaneously. And they're split up into four units because each one of those perspectives occupies one of those squares, either physics or psychology or what. Remember I said beneath the physics or psychology or what, there are four further ones beneath those. And so it's trying to work through or resolve a conflict while exploring those, or by exploring them in a certain sequence. So it predicts the four, remember, that are running, these perspectives are running simultaneously through the course of the film, and roughly after the first unit of every through line, that's roughly Act 1, and then Act 2 is basically the two middle columns, and then Act 3, what people think of as Act 3, is the final column. And then there's a turning point tied to the objective story. There's an event which begins the story at the beginning of that first column. In other words, you have the column 1, then you have an inciting incident tied to the objective story that that begins the conflict. There, prior to that, everything had been stable. It might not have been good or happy or whatever, but it had been stable. And then this new event changes things and creates a need to have the problem resolved in the objective story. And then there's another one that twists things and changes it into a new direction at the beginning of Act 2. And then there's something, that's why there's often something, sometimes it's hard to tell. There's another one at the beginning of column 3, and that's at the midpoint of the movie. And then there's one that ushers in Act 3, which would actually be column 4. And then there's one at the end that resolves, it's at the end of the, during the climax, that resolves the whole conflict begun by this inciting incident. So there's more to it. But I had that, but I was trying to figure out over the course of those years and going back to my script writing and those notes, how to coordinate all four so that it wouldn't seem as though I'm just copying what the report says. As I explained in part two in my prior video, I wanted it to seem natural. I wanted to use all those facets in the report, but I wanted to express them and coordinate them into a screenplay that seemed natural and flowed just like any movie you would see in a movie theater, just like a professional film. I didn't want it to come across as though I'm copying something blindly. So I wanted to understand Dramatica well. So I had questions on how to express and how to translate what I knew about this, what I just explained to you, what that report was giving me in terms of my own argument or statement. It gave certain values that are particular to my story. My Madonna story I was working on. And I didn't know that you had to actually express them in terms of conflict. I thought, okay, in this period they're learning something. The different characters are learning something, and here they're struggling with understanding something, and then here they're struggling with obtaining something. And I just thought about it in terms of obtaining or trying to obtain. However, and again, as you understand from the prior video to this in part two, Jim Hull had his own branch off from Dramatica, specifically aimed at applying Dramatica theory to screenwriting and storytelling. Specifically, is aimed at screenwriters. He emphasized this in his subtext. Website, I'll call it. There's an app for it, and there are different aspects of this website, the subtext website. Subtext SUBTXT dot, I think it's APP. You should be able to find it with a web browser. He brought to the fore something that the two developers of Dramatica had hinted at sometimes. Sometimes they would say in a line or so during their recorded analysis sessions when they would have the group in to analyze a movie. Sometimes they would give nice, interesting comments, and those nice, interesting comments were often very helpful. And like an offhand, off-the-cuff remark about how Dramatica works was very handy. Unfortunately, it didn't come often enough for my taste. So one of these was Jim Hull iterated or reiterated brought to the fore in subtext was that each of those segments, like learning, understanding, whatever order they're placed in or whatever perspective you find them in, understanding, learning, doing, obtaining, or conceiving, conceptualizing, being, becoming, whatever they are, and that the report predicts, those aren't just phases of becoming or doing. It's a conflict between two values. You want to conceive this. I mean, you conceive this, and you hold this statement to be true about conceiving something. But there's also another aspect of conceiving. You hold this truth to be accurate. In other words, there are two truthful statements you believe in, both focusing or balanced on this idea of conceiving, and you're trying to resolve the two. They can't coexist. I wish I had known that a long time earlier. So he also found that when he applied this, there's a mechanism, there's an engine that enables the prediction of the order in which the perspectives, those columns, you remember those units. There's a mechanism or engine within the Dramatica program, and apply, the theory that as part of the theory that predicts the order in which they occur. Um, the order in which they occur. Um, so Jim Hall found that when he figured out how to do it himself, I mean he they had already developed it, but he like rediscovered it for himself so that he could be able to take within an act, he could figure out the order of the sequences within the act, within each act. So you didn't just have four columns. You could fill in. It would predict accurately, um, basically down to the scene level. The themes. It wouldn't tell you what character was interacting with what other character, but it would tell you the themes that should be explored down to that level. And okay, I wish I had known. I wish I had this tool available to me years earlier. It was only done in the past few years. It was done like last year. I think last year, maybe the year before that. I think it was last year, something like that. It was within a matter of months that I was able to get a report that full. So, um, so there's that. There's not having access to enough of the report. There's the struggle to learn how dramatica theory works and how to apply what the report says um, naturally with a natural flow to it. Um, and there's also struggling to find stable work and tiredness. And now, of course, Wegmans, the afternoon job I have sometimes during the week. Um, I just feel right now that I guess maybe I'm watching more YouTube videos than I should. At this point in my life, to be honest, I don't want to say I've given up on the Madonna project. Um, I just my computer also isn't as sophisticated. It's slow. It's a 2012 computer, which I suspect, from what I understand of computers, over time has actually slowed down. It's not that it was slower than newer computers. It's that over time the connections become weaker, or whatever. The innards, insides of the computer weaken or slow down, I guess, with that, as with just about everything else. Um, I've talked about 42 minutes, going on 43 minutes. Um, Maybe I should call it quits for now and follow up maybe in a future video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.